Today I'm going to tell you the story of Ruby Henderson, a young woman rejected by every suitor for being too fat. When quiet cowboy Sam Crawford saw her crying by a creek and said, "She's perfect for me," their love would transform not just her body, but her entire life. But this story has an ending that no one saw coming. Please subscribe to our channel and comment where you're listening to this story from. The Bride Nobody Wanted. The Wyoming Territory sun beat down mercilessly on the small frontier town of Silver Creek as 20-year-old Ruby Henderson stood nervously in the parlor of Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, smoothing down her best dress for what felt like the 100th time. The blue calico fabric, though carefully mended and pressed, strained across her fuller figure in a way that made her acutely aware of every curve and that set her apart from the other young women. Ruby was not what most men of 1884 considered an ideal bride. At 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing considerably more than the delicate, waif-like women who were fashionable at the time, she had endured years of whispered comments, sideways glances, and outright rejection from potential suitors. Her face, however, was undeniably beautiful. Large, expressive brown eyes framed by thick lashes, full lips that curved naturally into a warm smile, and smooth, creamy skin that glowed with health despite her struggles with self-confidence. "Now remember, Ruby," Mrs. Patterson said, adjusting the younger woman's hair for the third time, "Mr. Whitmore is a successful merchant with property in town. He's looking for a practical wife, someone who can help him with his business and give him children. Don't mention anything about your appetite problems." Ruby winced, a familiar sting of the older woman's. Mrs. Patterson meant well, but her constant reminders about Ruby's weight and the need to make the best of what God gave her had worn down Ruby's already fragile self-esteem over the months she had been staying at the boarding house. The sound of heavy footsteps on the front porch announced the arrival of Harold Whitmore, Ruby's latest potential suitor. At 38, Whitmore was considered a good catch by the standards of Silver Creek. He owned the largest general store in town, had a decent house, and was looking for a wife to help him establish a family legacy. Ruby had met him briefly at church. While he hadn't seemed particularly interested in her personality or thoughts, he had agreed to this formal meeting after Mrs. Patterson had extolled Ruby's domestic skills and practical nature. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore," the door to admit a tall, thin man with receding brown hair. "Ruby is so looking forward to speaking with you." Whitmore's gaze swept over Ruby from head to toe, and she saw his expression change from polite interest to barely concealed disappointment. The way his eyes lingered on her fuller hips, her rounded face, and her soft arms made Ruby feel like livestock being evaluated or purchased rather than a woman courted. "Miss Henderson," stiff, his voice lacking any warmth. "Mrs. Patterson tells me you're an excellent cook and seamstress." "Yes, sir," Ruby replied quietly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her to keep them from trembling. "I've been helping Mrs. Patterson with the boarding house meals and mending for the past year." "I see." Whitmore's tone was noncommittal as he continued his visual assessment. "And your family situation?" "My parents died of fever 3 years ago," the familiar pain of loss mixing with her current humiliation. "I have no other family, is why I came to Silver Creek to make a new life." Whitmore nodded, absent, but Ruby could see that his attention was already wandering. After less than 10 minutes of stilted conversation about household management and Ruby's limited dowry, he made his excuses and left, promising to consider his option. A polite way of saying he had no intention of pursuing a courtship. "Well," Mrs. Patterson said after Whitmore's departure, her voice tight with disappointment, "that could have gone better. Perhaps if you had worn the brown dress instead, it's more slimming." Ruby barely heard the criticism. She was too busy fighting back tears of humiliation and despair. This had been her 4th formal meeting with a potential suitor in the past 6 months, and each one had ended the same way, with a man who had initially shown interest backing away once he saw her in person. "Mrs. Patterson," Ruby said quietly, "perhaps I should look for work instead. Maybe as a school teacher or—" "Nonsense," the older woman interrupted. "You're 20 years old, Ruby. If you don't marry soon, you'll end up a spinster. We just need to find the right man, someone who values substance over—" He gestured vaguely. That afternoon, Ruby escaped the boarding house and walked to the edge of town, seeking solitude among the cottonwood trees that lined Silver Creek. She needed to think, to figure out what she was going to do with her life if marriage wasn't a realistic. As she sat on a fallen log, watching the water flow past, she reflected on how different her life had become she had once imagined. 3 years ago, living on her family's small farm in Missouri, Ruby had been confident and happy despite her fuller figure. Her parents had loved her exactly as she, and the young men in their community had seemed genuinely interested in her wit, her cooking skills, and her warm personality. But after her parents' death and her move to Wyoming Territory, everything had changed. Here, she was judged solely on her appearance, found wanting, dismissed. The sound of approaching horses interrupted her solitude. Looking up, Ruby saw a small group of cowboys riding toward town, probably heading to the saloon after a long day of work. She started to get up, not wanting to be seen in her emotional state, but one of the riders had already noticed her. The man who separated from the group and rode toward her was tall and lean, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of hard work and self-reliance. His dark hair was hidden beneath a well-worn hat, and his clothes were the practical garb of a working cowboy, clean but clearly used. What struck Ruby most were his a warm gray that seemed to take in everything. "Afternoon, miss," the brim of it. "I'm Sam Crawford. I hope I'm not intruding, but you looked like you might be in some distress." Ruby quickly looked at her eye, embarrassed a stranger. "I'm fine, thank you, just enjoying the scenery." Sam studied her face for a moment, and Ruby braced herself for the familiar look of disappointment, dismissal. Instead, she saw something unexpected, genuine concern, and what appeared to be appreciation for what he... "Forgive me for saying so, miss, but you don't look fine," said gently, "and there's no shame in admitting when something's troubling you. Sometimes talking to a stranger can help." There was something about his quiet, respectful manner that made Ruby feel safe enough to be honest. "I'm Ruby Henderson," she said, "and you're right. I'm not fine. I'm beginning to think I don't belong anywhere." "That's a heavy burden for someone so young," Sam observed, settling onto a nearby rock with the easy grace of a man comfortable in the outdoors. Mind if I ask what's brought you to that conclusion?" Ruby found herself telling this stranger about her failed courtship, her struggles with feeling accepted in Silver Creek, and her growing despair about her future. Throughout her recounting, Sam listened without interruption, his expression serious and attentive. "So you see," Ruby concluded, "I'm not what men here want in a wife. I'm too substantial for their tastes." Sam was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes studying her intensity that made Ruby's warm. When he finally spoke, his words surprised her. "Miss Henderson," quietly, "I think those men are fools. Any man worth his consider himself lucky to court a woman." Ruby stared at him. You're just being kind." "No, ma'am," Sam replied firmly. "I'm being honest. You're beautiful, clearly intelligent, and from what you've told me, you have skills that would make any household run smoothly. If the men in this town can't see that, then they're blind as well as fools." For the first time in months, Ruby felt a spark of hope kindle in her chest. This quiet cowboy, this stranger who owed her nothing, had seen something in her that no one else seemed to notice. And as she looked into his sincere gray eyes, she began to wonder if perhaps story wasn't over after all, finding worth in unexpected places. 2 weeks had passed since Ruby's encounter with Sam Crawford by the creek, and she found herself thinking about their conversation more often than she cared to admit. His words that she was beautiful and that any man would be lucky to court her echoed in her mind during the long days of helping Mrs. Patterson with the boarding house chores. For the first time in months, Ruby caught herself humming while she worked, and she noticed that her reflection in the mirror didn't seem quite as disappointing as it once had. Sam had begun appearing in town more frequently, always finding polite reasons to visit the boarding house. Sometimes he needed supplies that happened to be sold at the general store next door. Other times, he was delivering messages for his employer, rancher Thomas Mitchell, who owned the largest cattle operation in the county. Each time, he made a point of speaking with Ruby, always treating her with the same respectful kindness that had first surprised her. "Miss Henderson," Sam said on a particularly warm Thursday afternoon, appearing at the boarding house's back door, where Ruby was hanging laundry. "I hope I'm not disturbing your work." Ruby turned from the clothesline, her face lighting up with a smile that had become increasingly frequent during his visits. "Not at all, Mr. Crawford. It's always nice to..." Sam's presence had become a bright spot in her otherwise routine day. At 32, he was 12 years her senior, but his weathered handsomeness and quiet confidence made him seem both mature and approachable. His dark hair was always neatly combed when he came to town, and his gray eyes held a warmth that made Ruby feel valued in a way she had never experienced. "I was wondering," said, his hat in his hands, he spoke, "if you might be interested in taking a ride with me this Sunday after church. There's a meadow about 5 miles north of town that's particularly beautiful this time of year." Ruby's heart skipped a beat. This was more than their casual conversations. This was a formal invitation, the kind that, in frontier society, indicated serious romantic interest. But even as excitement bubbled up inside her, doubt crept in as well. "Mr. Crawford," she said hesitantly, "I'm not sure that would be appropriate. People might talk, and I wouldn't want to damage your reputation by being seen with—" "With what?" Sam interrupted gently. "With an intelligent, kind, beautiful woman? Miss Henderson, if my reputation can't survive being seen with someone of your caliber, then it's not a reputation worth protecting." The conviction in his voice made Ruby's cheeks warm with pleasure and disbelief. She had spent so long being told, directly and indirectly, that she was somehow less than other women, that hearing such genuine appreciation felt almost too good to be true. "I would like that very much," she said softly. Sunday arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of wildflowers across the Wyoming landscape. Ruby had agonized over what to dress for their outing, finally settling on her best green dress, the one that, while still snug across her fuller figure, brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes and complemented her auburn hair. Sam arrived at the boarding house, the gentle mare saddled for Ruby, his own sturdy gelding. Mrs. Patterson watched their departure with obvious curiosity, and what Ruby suspected was disapproval. But for once, Ruby didn't care what the older woman thought. The ride to Sam's meadow was a revelation. Away from the judgmental eyes of the townspeople, Ruby felt free to be herself, to laugh at Sam's stories about life on the ranch, to share her own memories of growing up on her family's farm, and to simply enjoy the company of a man who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions. "This is beautiful, Ruby." They reached the meadows. It was a hidden valley surrounded by gentle hills, carpeted with wildflowers, and bisected by a clear stream that caught the afternoon sunlight like scattered diamonds. "I found this place about 5 years ago," Sam said as he helped her "I come here sometimes when I need to think, or when the world seems to—" They spread a blanket near the stream, and Sam unpacked a simple but thoughtful picnic, fresh bread and cold water in glass. As they ate, their conversation flowed as naturally as a stream. "Tell me about your family's farm." Genuinely interested in her pet, Ruby found herself describing the small Missouri farm she had grown, the chickens the garden she had tended with her mother, and the simple happiness of a life where she had been valued for who she was rather than how she looked. "You miss it," Sam observed, watching the wistful expression. "I do. Not just the place, but feeling like I belonged somewhere, feeling like I had value beyond—" She gestured vaguely at her figure. Sam was quiet for a moment, then reached over and gently took her hand. The contact sent a shock of warmth up his arm and made her heart race in a way that was both exciting and terrifying. "Ruby," he said, using her first name for the first time, "I want you to understand. The way you look, your curves, your softness, your fullness, that's not something that needs to be apologized for or hidden. You're a woman, not a girl, and you look like a woman. There's beauty and strength in—" Ruby stared at him. No one had ever spoken to her with such acceptance and appreciation. The men who had rejected her had made her feel like her figure was a flaw to be overlooked at best. Sam was speaking about it as if it were something to be celebrated. "I don't understand. Every other man who's met me has found me lacking." "Then they're fools," Sam said firmly. "Ruby, when I look at you, I see a woman who could work beside me, who could handle the challenges of frontier life, who has the strength and substance to build something. I see someone who would be a true partner, not just an ornament." As the afternoon wore on, Ruby found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't in years. Sam's consistent kindness and obvious attraction to her, exactly as she began to chip away at the walls of insecurity she had built around her. When he looked at her, she saw admiration in his eyes, not tolerance or resignation, but genuine appreciation for what he saw. "Sam, why are you interested in me? Truly, there are prettier, more fashionable women in silver." Sam stopped packing their picnic and looked at her. "Ruby, those women you're talking about, they're pretty, I'll give you that. But pretty fades. What you have runs deeper. You have kindness that shows in everything you have strength that's carried you through loss and heart. You have a genuine warmth that makes people feel welcome and valued. And yes, you're beautiful, not despite your curves, because of them. You look like a woman who could mother children, work a farm, and stand beside a man through good times and bad. Ruby felt tears, but for once they were tears of joy rather than pain. No one has ever said anything like that to me. Then no one has been paying attention, Sam replied simply. As they rode back toward Silver Creek, Ruby felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not just hope for a future with this remarkable man, but hope that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly who she was supposed to be. Sam Crawford saw her not as a consolation, as a prize worth winning. "Ruby," Sam said as they reached the edge of town, "I'd like to court you properly if you'll have me. I want to spend time with you, get to know you better, and see where this leads us." "Yes," Ruby said without hesitation, her face glowing with happiness. "I would like that very much." As Sam helped her down from her horse at the boarding house, Ruby caught sight of several townspeople watching their return with obvious curiosity. For the first time since arriving in Silver Creek, she didn't care what. She had found someone who saw her worth, and that was worth more than all the approval of strangers. Mrs. Patterson's disapproving frown as Ruby entered the boarding house couldn't dampen her spirits. Ruby Henderson was being courted by a good man who appreciated her exactly as she was, and that knowledge filled her with a confidence she had thought she might never feel again. The transformation had begun, not of her body, but of her spirit, and that, Ruby was beginning to understand, was where true beauty had always resided. Love changes everything. 3 months into their courtship, Ruby Henderson was a different woman than the one who had sat crying by the Sam Crawford's consistent love and admiration had worked a kind of magic on her spirit, and the transformation was evident to anyone who took the time to really look. Her brown eyes sparkled with confidence, her smile came easily and often, and she carried herself with a dignity that made her natural beauty impossible to ignore. The changes weren't just Ruby had begun taking long walks every morning, initially just to have time to think about her growing feelings for Sam, but gradually discovering she enjoyed the physical activity and the way it made her feel stronger and more energetic. She had also unconsciously begun eating less, not from any deliberate attempt to lose weight, but because happiness had replaced the emotional emptiness that had driven her to find comfort in food. "You're glowing," Mrs. Patterson observed as Ruby prepared breakfast at the boarding. There was a note of surprise, as if she couldn't quite believe the transformation was witnessed. Ruby smiled as she kneaded bread dough, her movements confident and efficient. "I feel different," she admitted, "happier than I've been in years." It was true. Sam's courtship had been everything Ruby had never dared to hope for. He treated her like a treasure, sought out her opinions, shared his dreams of expanding his small homestead into a proper ranch, and made it clear in dozens of small ways that he considered himself fortunate to have won her affection. Under the steady warmth of his regard, Ruby had begun to see herself through his eyes, not as too much woman, but as exactly the right amount. "Mr. Crawford is certainly devoted," her tone grudgingly approving. "I've never seen a man pay such consistent attention to one woman." Sam visited every day that his work allowed, bringing small gifts, wildflowers, smooth stones from the creek, once a book of poetry he had ordered specially from Denver. But more precious than any gift were the hours they spent talking, sharing their hopes, fears, and discovering the deep compatibility between them. That evening, Sam arrived with an expression of barely contained excitement that immediately caught Ruby's attention. "Good evening," using the endearment that never failed. "I have something to show you." "What is it?" Noting the way his gray eyes danced with anticipation. "Put on your shawl," Sam said mysteriously. "I want to take you somewhere." They walked through the quiet streets of Silver Creek. The sun set, past the general store where Harold Whitmore stood in his doorway and watched them with obvious bewilderment. Ruby had noticed Whitmore's increasing attention to her late, the way he seemed to be reassessing his earlier dismissal, but she felt only at his. Her heart belonged completely to Sam. Sam led her to the edge of town, to a plot of land she had never paid much attention. In the fading light, she could see the wooden framework of what was obviously going to be a good-sized with a front porch and large windows. Sam, understanding flooding through her. Is this our future? Sam shaking her hands in his. If you'll have it, Ruby Henderson, I love you with everything I am. I love your kindness, your beautiful smile, and yes, I love every soft, wonderful curve of. I want to marry you, build this house, proving the most. Ruby felt tears of joy streaming down her face as Sam dropped to one knee and pulled a simple gold band from it. It wasn't an elaborate ring. Cowboys didn't make the kind of money that bought fancy jewelry, but it was chosen with love and offered with complete sincerity. Will you marry me, Ruby? Will you be my wife and my partner in building something beautiful together? Yes. Then louder. Yes, Sam Crawford, I will marry you. As Sam slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to, Ruby felt a completeness she had never imagined. This man loved her, not in spite of us, but because he had seen her worth when she couldn't see, and in doing so, he had given her the gift, the ability. The next morning brought unexpected visitors to the boarding house. Ruby was hanging laundry. She heard her name, urgent. In the front parlor, she found Harold Whitmore and two other men who had previously shown in courting her, Tom Bradley, the young banker, and Dr. Edmund Hay. Miss Henderson, Whitmore began, his manner much more respectful than it had been during their disastrous first meeting. We understand that congratulations are in order. Word of your engagement has spread quickly. Ruby held up her left hand, letting the simple gold band catch the morning light. Yes, Mr. Crawford and I are to be married next month. About that, Dr. Hayes interjected, stepping forward with the kind of confidence that came from his position as one of the town's most eligible bachelors. We think you might be making a hasty decision. Crawford is just a cowboy. He can't offer you the kind of security and social position that others could provide. Ruby stared at the three men in amaze. These were the same men who had rejected her, who had made her feel unwanted and unworthy. Now that someone else valued her, they were suddenly interested in what they had previously dismissed. Gentlemen, Ruby said, her voice steady and clear, I appreciate your concern, but I'm afraid you're mistaken about several things. First, Sam Crawford is not just anything. He's a good, honest man who works hard and treats people with respect. Second, he's building his own ranch and has excellent prospects. And third, even if none of that were true, I would still choose him over any other man because he loves me exactly as I am. But Ruby, Whitmore said, using her first name without permission, surely you can see that your situation has improved considerably since we first met. You're looking quite well, and I think we may have been too hasty in our previous assessments. Ruby felt a flash of anger that surprised her with its intensity. My situation, Mr. Whitmore? Do you mean that I've lost some weight and therefore become acceptable to you? How generous of you to reconsider your rejection, now that I more closely resemble your ideal. The men exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly not expecting such directness from the woman they remembered as shy and insecure. The truth is, Ruby continued, I haven't changed that much physically. What's changed is that I've learned to see myself through the eyes of someone who loves me. Sam Crawford looked at me when I was at my heaviest and saw beauty. He valued my character, my intelligence, and yes, my body exactly as it was. That kind of love is worth more than all the social position and security in the world. Dr. Hayes tried one more. Miss Henderson, surely you understand that Crawford's interest might be more practical than romantic. A man in his position might see marriage to you as beneficial for reasons other than love. Ruby's eyes flashed with indignation. Dr. Hayes, that's one of the most insulting things anyone has ever said to me. And considering some of the things I've heard about my appearance over the past year, that's saying quite a lot. Now, Ruby, as Patterson interjected, clearly flustered by the confrontation, these gentlemen are just trying to look out for your best interest. No, they're not. They're trying to salve their own conscience for the way they treated me when they thought I wasn't good enough for them. Well, gentlemen, I have news for you. I was good enough then, I'm good enough now, and I'm going to marry a man who has always known my worth. As the three men filed out of the boarding house, clearly chastened by her rejection, Ruby felt a fierce pride in herself and in the life she had found a man who loved her for exactly who she was, and more importantly, she had found herself. That evening, when Sam arrived for their daily visit, Ruby told him about the morning's encounter. His reaction was exactly expected, a mixture of indignation on her behalf, pride in how she'd handled the situation. You're magnificent, pulling her. Those fools have no idea what they lost, but I know exactly what I've gained. As Ruby looked into Sam's loving gray eyes, she realized that her transformation was complete. She was no longer the broken, insecure woman who had cried by the creek. She was Ruby Henderson, soon to be Ruby Crawford, a woman who knew her own worth and had found a man worthy of her love. The wedding was only weeks, but Ruby knew that the most important change had already taken. She had learned to love herself, and that had made all the difference. A perfect. 1 year after their wedding, Ruby Crawford stood in the doorway of the home Sam had built for her, watching her husband work with their horses in the corral. The transformation in her life still amazed her sometimes, but it was the transformation herself that truly. At 21, Ruby had become the woman she was always meant to be, confident, radiant, and blessed with the kind of natural beauty that came from being deeply loved and completely happy. The physical changes had been gradual, remarkable. The daily walks had become rides across the expanding ranch land. The emotional eating had been replaced by meals shared with joy and gratitude. The insecurity that had once made her seek comfort in food had been healed by Sam's unwavering love and Ruby was a curvy woman. Sam made it clear daily that he loved but she was now healthy, strong, and comfortable in her skin. "Mrs. Crawford," Sam called out with a grin that still made her heart skip after more than a year of marriage. "Care to help me with this stubborn mare?" Ruby laughed and walked toward the corral, her movements graceful and confident. She wore a simple blue dress that she had sewn herself, fitted to show off her figure in a way that would have mortified the insecure girl she had once been. Now she dressed to please herself and her husband, taking pride in her appearance without shame or apology. "She's not stubborn," Ruby said, approaching the mare with the calm confidence she had developed around animals. "She's just testing you to see if you mean what you say." "Sounds like someone else I know," Sam teased, pulling Ruby into his arms for a quick kiss that tasted of sunshine and possibility. Their ranch had prospered beyond their wildest dreams. Sam's skill with horses and Ruby's talent for managing the business side of their operation had proven to be a perfect combination. They had expanded from Sam's small homestead to a thriving ranch that supplied horses to the army and cattle to markets as far away as Denver. "Sam," Ruby said as they walked back toward the house, "Mrs. Patterson stopped by this morning while you were in town." "Oh? What did the old gossip want?" Sam asked, good-natured humor. Mrs. Patterson had become one of Ruby's greatest champions once it became clear that her marriage to Sam was both successful and profitable. "She wanted to tell me that Harold Whitmore has been asking about me again," Ruby said, unable to keep the amusement out of her voice. Sam stopped walking and turned to face his. "Is that so? And what exactly is Harold Whitmore asking?" "Apparently he's been telling anyone who will listen that he always knew I had potential and that he's kicking himself for not pursuing me more aggressive." Mrs. Patterson seemed to think I should be flattered. "And are you?" Sam asked, though his gray eyes were dancing with mirth rather than concern. "Hardly," he said, moving closer to her husband. "I'm too busy being grateful that I ended up with a man who saw my worth when I was too blind to see it myself." Sam's expression grew serious as he cupped Ruby's face in his hands. "Ruby Crawford, you are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. You were beautiful the day I met you by that creek. You were beautiful on our wedding day, and you grow more beautiful every day we're together. But your physical beauty, stunning as it is just the beginning. You're intelligent, kind, strong, and you make me want to be a better man every single day." Ruby felt the familiar warmth that Sam's words always brought. "I love you too, Sam Crawford, more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person." As they reached their front porch, Ruby paused to look back at the thriving ranch. The house Sam had started before their engagement was now a comfortable home filled with laughter, love, and the promise of future. The corrals held some of the finest horses in the territory, and their cattle grazed on rich grassland that stretched to the horizon. "Do you ever think about those men who rejected me?" settling into her favorite chair on the porch. "Honest, I thank them every day," Sam replied, sitting beside her and taking her hand. "If they had been smart enough to see what I saw, I might never have had the chance to win your heart. You didn't have to win it. You had it from the moment you told me I was." And that evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Ruby reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this. She had arrived in Silver Creek broken, insecure, and convinced that she was somehow less than other women. She had found not just love, but self-love, the understanding that her worth had never been tied to her appearance or to other people's approval. Ruby, Sam said, his voice carrying a note of excitement that made her look at him with curiosity. What is it? I got some interesting news in town today, he said, his eyes sparkling with barely contained delight. Dr. Hayes is leaving Silver Creek. Apparently, he's been having some financial difficulty and needs to start over somewhere else. Oh my, remembering the pompous physician who had tried to convince her that Sam was beneath her. What happened? Word is he's been making some poor investments and has developed quite a gambling problem, Sam replied. Tom Bradley isn't doing much better. Seems the bank has been having some troubles of its own. And Harold Whitmore? Still running his store. But I heard he's been trying to court every unmarried woman within 50 miles and getting nowhere, Sam said. Turns out women don't much like men who are obviously settling for whatever they can get. Ruby. The men who had once made her feel worthless were struggling while she and Sam thrived. It seemed like poetic justice. Though she felt no real satisfaction, she was too happy with her own life to waste energy. Resentment. You know what the real irony is? Ruby said thoughtfully. What's that? They all think they missed out on marrying me because I became more attractive after we got together. They still don't understand that the real change was in my confidence, not my appearance. Their loss, Sam said firmly, though I have to admit, I'm grateful they were too blind to see what was right in front of them. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Ruby leaned against her husband's shoulder and marveled at the life they had created together. She was no longer the too-fat bride that nobody wanted. She was Ruby Crawford, successful rancher, beloved wife, and a woman who had learned that true beauty came from being loved and valued for exactly who you were. The quiet cowboy who had seen her worth, she couldn't see it herself, had given her the greatest gift imaginable. Not just his love, but the understanding that she had always been perfect exactly as she was. Some stories had fairy tale endings, but Ruby knew that her real life was better than any fairy tale, because it was built on genuine love, mutual respect, and the kind of happiness that could only come from finding someone who loved all of you. Sam Crawford had looked at her and said, "She's perfect for me," and in doing so, he had helped her become perfect for herself. That was a love worth waiting for, worth fighting for, and worth celebrating every single day for the rest of their lives together.